So what I want to talk about in this session is time. It's everywhere. We can't get away from it. It features in films, science fiction, it's in our language, it's everywhere. It's also inside metaphors. Now, I can't give you the entire spiel on time. I have about a whole week's worth of material for this. Metaphors of time features two major areas. There's metaphors of time, which is what I'm going to be doing today, and there's metaphors in time. Let me give you some of the examples of what I mean by metaphors in time. If you think about it, a lot of metaphors are timeless. I did a session in a practice group the other night, and the lady's metaphor was that she felt like she was drowning. And so she was at the bottom of the sea, and the water is above head height. And she's gone under, she's at the bottom, she's hit the bottom, she's at rock bottom. She feels suffocated, it's all washing over her, she's not going with the flow. All of those idioms that I'm sure you can think of. Many, many more. But she'd been there for like 20 years. So what I have is she's drowning over 20 years. So there's a kind of a timeless quality to her experience. And another one, there's a guy, a missile was coming at him, that was his metaphor. He was under attack, he was in the firing line, he was getting a rocket, and for boundary violation he was getting a rocket from his boss for a misdemeanor. And this rocket's coming at him, and it's been coming at him actually for several weeks. And he's in the firing line, he's like going to get hit by this thing. But the rocket never hits him, it's always in that process of hitting him. So there's this kind of timeless quality to metaphors. Now, if you think about it, dreams, which although highly symbolic and metaphorical, they differ in one important detail. Dreams, although they're fairly non-linear, there is a linear time element. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, usually with a punchline. So dreams and metaphors aren't quite the same in how they're structured, but they're highly symbolic in commonality. Now, as a therapist, organizing and thinking about how people organize time, I don't know what I'm talking about there, time is very important as a therapist, that's what I'm trying to say. I can give you an example. If you think about, say, guilt's a very retrospective experience. In order to feel guilty, I have to think about the past. It's very hard to think about guilt in the future. Guilt is a retrospective emotion. If I think about anxiety, anxiety is usually a prospective, a future-orientated experience. We can be anxious about stuff in the past, but it's usually the yet-to-manifest stuff that we're not, hasn't come to our fruition yet that we're worried about. So it's in our future, effectively. So past is guilt, future anxiety. Anger, meanwhile, is about now. That's why you teach the angry person, or say to the angry person, when did you first start feeling angry? They have to back up in time. They'll normally calm down a bit. So emotions give away the time orientation the person has. So just for example, the depressive who ruminates on guilt isn't spending too much time organizing their future because they're ruminating about the past. The depressive who's anxious, chances are they're not spending too much time taking responsibility for their past because they're anxious about the future, and for them it's a future pace. So a lot of emotions have a time quality to them. You might want to spend time listing out all the emotions you can think of and placing where they are in terms of time orientation. It's not as black and white as in it's past, present, or future. It might be there are other variables. Have a consideration of those and see, okay, in order to have this organization of emotion, how am I organizing time? Think about procrastination, for example. Not really that much of an emotion, although it can be emotionally driven. I'm never quite getting there. I'm always putting it off. The future gets further away as I move towards it. Some people spend a lot of time backing up in time. They're backing up, backing out. So they get into stuff, they come out of stuff. And we have the organization of how they do that if we look at the metaphorical structure. So, time metaphors. Now I've got a lot of these written down. I've been teaching this in the 4-day workshops that I've been doing with metaphors or aspects of this. Up until now, I have to tell you, I'm not doing it anymore. It's the single most unpopular aspect of the workshop. People don't seem to enjoy this very much. which frustrates me because I think it's amazing stuff to explore. But I think because I work with this therapeutically, I'm aware of the importance of it, and of what I can do with it. Introducing it to people for the first time and then getting them to play with it, I think it's a little bit too complicated, it's a little bit too much, and it's like, where do I start? Because there's so much here. So, let me give you the first simple division of metaphors of time. Time as a moving object, or time as a stationary object. For example, if I use George Lakoff's thinking on this one, time as a moving object, Christmas is fast approaching. So Christmas as a time is approaching. Now, if we add in the metaphors of movement aspect, it's approaching from which direction is something that's worth considering. Because the different directions, as you know, have quite different connotations as to how they're organized. So if Christmas is approaching, where is it approaching from? And once it's approached, where does it go? Again, which direction? Because Christmas reflects a seasonal type thing, it's cyclical. It comes round again and again and again. And Christmas is forever coming round again. So there might be a circular motion of some description. It's going to be different for different people, according to how they have interpreted Christmas is approaching. Now, not everyone has that. Some people are as we approach Christmas, as we draw ever closer towards Christmas. Time is running out. There's only 600 shopping days left to next Christmas, or whatever. So time is stationary, time is a moving object. My birthday is looming closer. So my birthday is looming. Very different to approaching. So in terms of the movement of the object of time, there are differences in how it can move. As I slowly move towards my 40th birthday. So again, I have a way of moving forwards. Time can plod on. I like Robert Anton's Wilson thing, time passed like a herd of turtles. I've got some written down here. I've got so many, I thought I'd better write them down. Okay, so Christmas is coming. The time for whatever is nearly upon us. My birthday is approaching. This year has just flown by. Oh, isn't time really dragging? Time's going so slow this afternoon, isn't it? Time stands still. Now, obviously, that's a metaphor for static time, but it's actually stationary because it was moving. So time standing still is not the same as time being static, because it's standing still, as opposed to I'm moving to... You get the idea. There's the passage of time, the passing of time. The time is fast approaching. Now think about the passage of time versus the passing of time. If we think about journeys, and a lot of the stuff inside metaphor work is about journeys, it's about movement from A to B. There was a certain time when journeys were very, very different to how they are today. It still amazes me. I've just been over doing some work with Lucas Dirks, for example, in Holland, and I was able to get on a train, travel 45 minutes up to Gatwick, jump on a plane, go straight over there, and within 3 hours I was sitting having a cup of tea with Lucas Dirks. And he's miles away, he's in a different country. To have done that journey, say 200 years ago, would have been a whole different set of experiences. There would have been a lot of preparation, there would have been a lot more danger attached to it, there's a lot of risks involved with it. Pricing wise, it would have been comparatively very, very expensive to organise a trip like that. And my passage would have been very, very different. So how does one occupy themselves on a journey when the journey is a very long journey, which may take several days, where actually now it only takes us a few hours to do? So there's a whole thing about being inside an experience that's moving, as well as having time that's moving as well. And it's very, very different, for example, to putting a 4-year-old in a room with no stimulation and nothing to do whatsoever because it's an empty room. I'm just thinking about that marshmallow experiment where they had to wait a whole 4 minutes before the person came back with the second marshmallow. That's an incredible length of time when you're 4 with nothing to do. But of course, when you're 4, a year of your life is a quarter of your life. Now I'm nearly, I don't know, 44, something like that. Now I'm nearly 44, say. A year of my life is a much different comparative. It's only a smaller portion. So time seems to be accelerating for me rather than slowing down. Time perceptions are very, very malleable, and they also change according to the context of where we are and what we're doing. So one of the things I'm going to recommend people do, start thinking about different types of experiences that you have, ongoing activities, and divide them up. Which are the ones that for you experience more as time is moving and you're static? So time is passing slowly, time is passing quickly. Did I get it around the wrong way? And the other one is where time is stationary and you're the one moving. So as I move towards the deadline, as opposed to the deadline approaching. Now, think about, sorry, a bit random here, but think about motivations of deadlines approaching. If I experience the deadline approaching me, or I experience me approaching the deadline, doesn't sound good, does it? A deadline. I'm not sure why it's dead, but it doesn't sound good. Who has the control? If the deadline is approaching me, or I'm approaching the deadline, where's the control in that? Now, also, what's more likely to motivate me? And I suspect what's going to motivate me won't be the same for you necessarily. So, for example, if I can't control the deadline approaching me, I may feel powerless to do anything about that. I better get moving. But if I'm approaching the deadline, I get to organize myself accordingly, and therefore I can get moving. You see how that works? So for different people, the time organization is going to have different effects for them. So what I'm going to say, recommend, just to recap, think about different experiences. Where is time moving? Where is time static? And you're the one moving. And there's going to be a combination of the two. Sometimes there's a collision of forces going to hit each other. Now, moving on from that, of course, there's the speed of the time as well, and the mechanism of the movement. If I move towards my next birthday, how am I moving? If my birthday moves towards me. Now, I've hit that point in life, actually I did this about 15 years ago, where I keep getting my age wrong. I have to keep reminding myself, actually, how old am I? I have to work out the dates. Because I keep missing my own birthdays. On several occasions, because I travel a lot overseas, and I've spent a lot of time, say, living in India, I've had experiences where I had forgotten about my own birthday. I missed it. Now, if I missed my birthday, is my birthday coming towards me? Am I going towards it? Or am I going off at tangents? Or are we coming towards each other and we miss? It's just worth thinking about. Right, there's time as a container. I'm in time, I'm out of time. I'll do that in a minute. In a week's time, we have to do such and such. So we have containers of time. We have seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries, and centenary, I don't know, whatever they are. So we have containers and units of time that we don't all organize in the same size, for example, because we have time as having size structure, which I'll get to shortly. So in a minute, for me, because I'm quite accurate with time, in a minute means a minute. But I have met plenty of people that say in a minute, and an hour later, they still haven't done it. Because in a minute for them is a very, very different expression of something. It's an expression of something else, other than what I perceive a minute to be. How I experience a week may be very, very different according to somebody else, and how they experience a week. So we have these containers of time by which we understand a commonality between people, but it doesn't always quite work that way. I was in Nepal, I was up in the mountains, and myself and a couple of the other guys I'd met up with, we met this Nepalese guy. He was a bit of one of these Sherpas, looked like a guy who walks mountains as a lifestyle. And he took us off to show us some sights and stuff. And he said, well, we're just going to walk round the corner. So bring some provisions, it won't be far. Now, of course, just round the corner, it's not far. It's the shop on the corner here for me. Not for a Nepalese Sherpa, just around the corner is a mountain. And we go around the mountain. 8 hours walk each way. Wasn't a good day for me, I have to tell you. So for him, just around the corner, it's not the same measurement as I have. So even though we loosely use the same language in a minute, the person may not mean a 60-second minute, because their perception of what they organise a minute to be might not be the same as you. I was going somewhere with that and I've forgotten what I was going to say. Got lost in the Nepalese adventure there. Oh yeah, size and mass of time. Time is short. That's a long time. That's a long way off, and that's very close. My next birthday is getting very close. Christmas is really big this year. My birthday was only a small event, a small affair. So often we have this kind of size thing that's placed upon the thing itself that's measured by time. Think about what's a long time, what's a short time. Again, that's going to be different for different people. Again, if you're 4, a long time could be like 4 minutes. Okay, we have time as a motivation to action. It's nearly time to go. It's time to begin. It's time to move on. It's time to grow up. Time to get going. Your time starts now. I'm sure there's loads more you can put in the comment section below. Motivation to stop. Your time's up. Time is over. It's time to finish. I'm calling time on that. So we have demarcations of starting and stopping as well when it comes to time. Now, probably the biggest aspect of metaphors of time is time as a commodity, time as a unit of exchange. And I have a theory that this ties in closely to how people measure the size of time. What is your time worth? What's your time worth to you? What's your time worth to another person? So, for example, we're very familiar, in the Western world especially, of exchanging units of our time for currency that can then be spent. And how do you spend your time? Now, I have to tell you, spending money was actually meant something rude. I'll let you look that up if you want to know the etymology of that. Spending money, I'll tell you, there's a modern equivalent, I hear this more in Southampton, which probably says more about Southampton than anywhere else, about spunking a load of money. People still use that kind of expression. That's what spend also meant. Now, time is a commodity. So, I go to work, and I work X number of hours, which gets exchanged in a certain ratio for a set of money. So I might get an hourly wage, I might get a weekly wage, I might get a salary. Now, if I'm an hourly waged person, and say I'm getting paid £25 an hour, just as a random figure, and I end up staying an extra hour on Thursday, I might feel something is owed to me, the equivalent of £25. Now, I might want either the £25 money as an overtime payment, or I expect to have an hour given back to me the following week or later on, the time off in lieu type thing. If I'm salaried, so I get paid per month, and I'm expected to be there for so many hours a week, that extra hour may not be seen in terms of an hourly rate that I want to be exchanged back again. It might just be that I accumulate the hour, or I just see it as part of the thing. When people think only in terms of their annual wage, they may not even occur to them at all. So we start to see very, very different behaviours in how people behave in the workplace according to how they exchange their time. Generally, the lower end workers, in terms of responsibility and hierarchy, basically the people that do all the work, your workers, are more likely to be hourly waged. So they will have a much more precious situation about being expected to stay on longer. The person at the higher end, the one who oversees all the work, they may not. So they may work a lot longer hours, but not necessarily be so precious about having an exchange back again, because their time frames are very, very different. So we have a whole culture that's built around exchanging time for money. And of course there's the expression, time is money. We talk about, as I say before, spending your time, what is your time worth? This also then goes into identity. How do you value yourself? And some people, their self-worth is often measured by how they spend their time. And if they're spending their time doing stuff that they don't value, that may well impact upon their self-worth. You see how this all fits together. The more you listen for time metaphors, especially in relation to money, the more you'll start to see relationships between these different things. It's everywhere. And for those of you that have worked through all of the metaphors in my ATIC program, go back and start exploring time metaphors, especially if you're working with clients, and start listening for how they emerge inside metaphors. I'll give you a clue, by the way. Distance and angles are very much denoting of time. Think about it. I'm on an edge and I'm anxious. And I look down, it's a really big way down, but that's the way forward. That's a really big step, isn't it? If I'm on like a cliff and it's a way down, that's a big step. Now think about the time experience if I take a step forward, comparing that to if that's a gradual decline over a long period of time. Think about inclines as well with inclinations. The speed by which we move will be profoundly affected by the angles. So it's about distance and angles and movement. I'll let you work that out. Back to time as a commodity. Right, we can talk about making time. Very, very different to finding time. If I make time for you, that's got a very, very different relationship that I'm establishing than if I find time for you. And you'll see certain different personality quirks and characteristics in the person that's making time versus the person that's finding time. The person that's finding time isn't in control of it. The person who's making time is manufacturing, so they are in control of it, or to a much more degree. If I'm finding time, it's pre-made. I'm looking for more time. I'm always looking for more time. Not the same as making time. So it's a very, very subtle distinction. And I know I've in the past said about the pedantry that goes with certain NLP mindsets, where every word and phrase gets analyzed. In terms of metaphor, I think it is significant. Now, there's finding enough time. There's a lack of time, so I don't have enough. I haven't got enough time. There's a lack of time. I say looking for time. I say it's finding time. Making time for yourself. It's very important to make time for yourself, not the same as finding time for yourself. Some people have too much time, and when they have too much time, they do things like waste it. They've got too much time on their hands. They're wasting their time. We talked about things being a waste of time, which is not quite the same as having a perfect moment. A perfect moment is a moment that's perfect, which is not the same as a wasted moment. But it might be if it was a perfect moment you didn't utilize correctly. Utilization of your time. You've got to use your time wisely. Now, some people like to take time out. Now, there's several ways you can read that. Taking time out. Taking out of something and putting it into something else. Like we do with money. Some people invest their time in the same way they invest their money. I really value this time I have with you right now. Time is very precious, so don't waste it. I know I've done that one before. Think carefully about how you spend your time, and think about this one. How do you spend your free time? How do you spend your free time? Some people spend their time alone. Some people spend their time with others. And remember, the etymology of spend means something else. Spending time alone in that context may never be heard the same way again. This is taking a long time, I know. So do please take your time to give this your full attention. Imagine him and her having a beautiful moment. They're sitting. The sun is going down. It's a warm summer's evening. They're looking out upon the lake, and she says, "I'm so glad we could share this moment." And he says, "Yes, I've made some time for you." They're having the same experience, but they're not having the same experience. We're sharing this time. I'll give you some of my time. I'll make some time for you. Doesn't quite have the same connection. Now, if you listen to how people interact with each other, people who get on well generally have very similar time references in terms of the metaphors of time. I'm not talking about in time, through time from the NLP. In NLP, people organize this way, past and future, so they're going very much through time, tend to marry the opposite the in-time people, and they balance each other out and drive each other crazy. But how people metaphorically organize time will be very similar, and people that get on well, in my observation, there will be counterexamples. People get on well tend to have very, very similar ideas about time and about how it's organized, especially as a commodity. So people share time with each other, they might make time for each other, they might take up each other's time. I give my time freely to you, you give your time freely to me. But if I give you freely my time, but you give time to me expecting some kind of exchange, like I was talking about before, then there's an imbalance in that relationship. Because my time to you is free, but your time to me comes at a cost. And over the years, being self-employed, and given the line of work that I do, because I contract out so many of the things that I have to do, I tend to have working friendships with a number of people. So, for example, I have a friend who does aspects of website coding. Now, I always pay her. I never ask her for a favor. So the time that she puts into my website isn't free, it's chargeable. Now, simultaneously, I do some reciprocal work for her. Now, it's never done on a favor basis. The work I do for her, she pays me for as well. So there's a financial exchange. Now, a lot of people find that a bit odd, but we separate business, basically, from other connections. Now, sometimes I've had the experience where I've asked somebody who was a friend to do something for me, just as a favor. Maybe I was at a party, maybe I was in a bar, and I've just asked them, and they've done it, and they've done it straight away. But then I get an invoice that I wasn't expecting. A friend of mine, I can't tell you who, so don't ask. A friend of mine was asked by somebody if he would do an interview for them to help promote their little business online stuff. It was like a coaching type thing. And my friend did do that interview and then got a bill for it. Got a bill for a few $100s, which apparently was all there in the terms and conditions on the website. But he thought he was giving his time to them to help them with their business. Their whole perception of it, there was a miscommunication, their whole perception of it was they were giving their time to help him with his business. Now, for my friend, there was no consideration of a financial exchange in terms of what the time was worth. It was just, I give you some of my time. But to them, the time was something very much else. It was a commodity. And they saw the time they put in as being more important than the time he put in. So, as you can imagine, it didn't go very well. So, time is a commodity, but also, especially with money metaphors and workplace metaphors, because most of us work and we have the experience of working for money, and we give our time in exchange for money, there's a very strong linguistic relationship between those two areas. Right, what else have we got here? Right, we have orientation to time and location. Inside metaphors, start to look at if an object is moving. So supposing if I go back to the example of the guy who had the missile coming at him, it wasn't moving. The object he's being fired at him isn't actually moving. The metaphor has a timeless quality to it. So with the movement, where does it come from? Where's it going to? And then if it passes, where does it go? Where does it end up? So the orientation to time, where the person is facing, is also important. What's left is usually the unexplored past, because that's what's left. What's behind is usually the explored past. What's right is normally what is correct and righteous, its duty, and what's forward is usually much more aspirational. There's also where I stand. Think about moving objects inside metaphors. The direction in which they come from can be mapped into those things. It's not going to be 100% because there's going to be variables according to different people. But you may want to pay attention to those 4 different areas. And right now, I know at least one of you is going, hang on, what was that, those 4 areas? What's left is what's unexplored. It's what's come before. It's unexplored past. What's behind is where I've come from. It's the path that I've trodden, generally. What's right is more about duty and righteousness, and what's forward is more aspirational. So it's where I want to be, where I want to go. We also have the way forward that's left. I'll let you work these ones out. The way forward that's right, the right way forwards. There's what's left behind. It's not the same as what's left. What's left behind. What's right behind. What's right behind me is usually much more important than what's left behind me. Think about that one. So work out where objects are moving from starts to give you some kind of area in terms of the idioms that you're looking for to elicit or to impose even upon your client. Right, quickly going through some more here. Okay, we've got monitoring of time, another area to look at. This is usually externalized, but we keep track of time. We can lose track of time. We manage our time. We can be watching the clock. We can be noticing the time. We can be marking time. Obviously, there's ownership of time. I think I've done that already. Allotted time, giving you my time, sharing our time together, taking your time away from you, taking up your time, making time for you, spending our time together. Let's spend time together. Now, if we spend time together, who's paying? Worth thinking about. If we spend time together, who's paying? Okay, back to orientation of time. We can be in the moment. We can be back in the time when blah, blah, blah. We can be living in the past, living in the future, living in the moment, or living for the moment. Living for the future, living for the past. There are rules, there's governance of time, there's the correct use of time, the inappropriate use of time, the waste of time, foolish use of time, misuse of time, and an expensive waste of time. What else we got? I'm sure there's more. I've got scrawlings in my notebook here. I wrote these mostly on a plane. I was so bored, saying, okay, let's start thinking about time. Okay, now 3 processes. How do you acquire time? So some people make it, some people find it. But what is your acquisition of time? What is that? Compare that to your acquisition of money and wealth. Some people create wealth, some people try and earn money. Creating wealth is not the same thing as earning it. If I'm earning it, it's coming from another source, and I have to be deserving of it. If I'm creating it, I just need to know how to do that. How do I retain or hold on to my time, and how do I consume or dispose of time? Again, those things will parallel wealth and money as well. I think I'm about done for this little video. The dog's fallen asleep. I promised him we'd go for a walk before, and he was like, when I put this on, he was like, we're going out. No, we're not. You're helping me be cute in a video. So, as always, there's a comment section below. This is really metaphors of time. I haven't really gone too much into metaphors in time because that's a huge area. But to get you started on it, just to emphasize the point again, distance and angles are 2 areas to really consider, but also the mechanisms of the movement. One of the exercises I set people in the workshops, I don't do this anymore, it was too unpopular. I got people to think about approaching their next birthday. And another scenario where their birthday is approaching them. It might be Christmas, it might be Easter, it might be any other thing. So we have a comparison to I'm approaching it or it's approaching me. Now, what I got them to do was to then explore the metaphorical structure of that, particularly the rate of movement and momentum, and what are the differences between those 2 things. I would then get them to think about 1 hour from now. I used to set this at lunchtime, or just before lunch. So think about 1 hour from now. Is that approaching you, or are you approaching it? An hour from now. And then I would ask them to switch it to the other one. And play around with it. So if I'm approaching lunchtime, for example, if I'm approaching lunch, how do I slow that down? What are the elements that I can do to control that? Am I able to mess with it enough that I actually miss lunch altogether? Now, these things happen in normal everyday experience. We miss appointments. We miss time. I once got so absorbed in a computer game when I was on holiday. I was staying with people that had a computer. It was years ago now, and it was one of those ones you build empires and go shoot stuff up and all the rest of it. Now I started playing that at about 9 o'clock in the morning after all the kids had gone to school, and I was completely shocked when they then came back from school and I was still sat there. And I honestly had no awareness at all of the passing of time. I got so engrossed in it. I hadn't had lunch. I hadn't, as far as I know, moved from the chair. It was quite only time that's ever happened to me knowingly. It was quite a shock. So sometimes we miss the movement of time, or we just shoot past stuff and don't notice. So if we switch them over an hour from now, can you change your time configuration? If you start to think about money, if you're the one who exchanges time for money, how can you make that more scalable? In terms of entrepreneurs, they think about scalable thing. If I'm earning £10 an hour, to earn more money, I have to work more hours. There's only so many hours I can do, so there's a cap in how many hours I can actually exchange in the first place. If I sing you a song and you give me £4, and I go and sing another person a song and they give me £4, I sing another person a song, they give me £4. There's only so many times I can sing a song in a week in exchange for those £4. But if I record that song and I'll make that simultaneously available to everybody, it's now scalable because there's a ratio between the one recording and the one singing of the song and how many times it can be sold. So it's worth starting to think about, in terms of wealth as well, how you organize time. The last job that I had, where I worked for somebody else, I worked 2 days a week in a human resources department, and in all honesty, I probably did 10 minutes of work in those 2 days, primarily because I was there to fulfill a fairly decisive role in a few things. And I spent, like most of the people in the human resources department, looking busy, but not actually doing very much at all. So what I said to the boss was, boss, I want to put a proposal to you. I come in for 20 minutes a week and I keep the same pay. I will double my output and basically keep the same wage. And they said, no, we pay you to be here from 9 to 5 on those 2 days, regardless of my function or things to do while I was there. Now that just didn't seem very sensible to me, and that was when I began to realise it was time to leave and work for myself. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. As always, comment section below. I would love to hear any thoughts on this one. Now, by the way, I've put this video on YouTube, as well as on the Metaphors in My Attic program. For the people on YouTube watching this going, what the hell is he talking about? If you go to the website, the link is in the blurb below here, www.metaphorsinmyattic.com. There is now over 12 hours of me talking on video about the metaphors stuff and how I approach that in client work. What this is now is effectively the precursor for the 4-day training workshops that I do, which are taught in the UK, in India, and the USA. The links for training in those areas are in the thing below. I'm signing off. I'm going to walk the dog. See you later.